see our lovely faces.
That's no good. I can't do it. I need reaction shots.
We can be audible.
Okay, all right, yeah. Do that.
It's the beauty of podcasting. We're very used to explaining everything.
Or
Yeah.
not.
Oh, hey, have you been out this morning? Are you?
No, well, a bit. I'm in the throes of marking. It's just trying to catch up with myself before I have a little break. And I've got a lovely long list of people's portfolios. Look, here they are. Oh my goodness.
Whoa.
Wow.
I'm powering through.
I mean, that is a testament that, like, from that very brief, like, flash of that, I could already see that is more colourful than anything I've ever made. Admin.
Oh, come on. If you don't have 6 highlighter pens of different colours, then you're just not living life right. It's
Yeah.
just, no.
There must be a word for, like, love of stationery. Like.
Isn't it teacher? Isn't that what? I swear, right? So I always give people on my courses a notebook, and I bring along this box of notebooks, and it's like a really fraught part of the course as people try and choose the right notebook.
Oh,
Right.
really?
Yeah, some people find it really intense, and I can completely empathise because I'm like, what will I need to do with this notebook? Will I keep it in my pocket, or will I want to like refer? Will I need it big so I can do big? Oh, it's so tricky. But I often notice there's a certain group or a certain type of teacher definitely has a love of stationery.
Girls. It's always girls.
Steady with that.
Oh, okay. Should we have that as a rambly start?
That's a rambly start.
If you like this podcast and want to support more episodes, you can donate through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Children of the Forest to show your support for the Forest School podcast.
Cool.
We need to tell people who we're talking to. So I think we have a start now. I think we need to start now.
Bang, we've started.
Yeah, we're starting now.
We started. We're talking to Lily.
We're talking to Lily Horseman.
Oh, hello.
Hi, Lily.
Long time listener, first time caller.
Awesome. So, Lily, you're chair of the FSA at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right.
And you run Kindling Play, Work and Training.
Mm-hmm.
And those of us who are kind of into the Forest School community on Facebook will know you and feel like we know you in real life, because I'd say you're kind of like a linchpin of the online community for Forest School, and a kind of a place where people go and kind of have a good old moan or share ideas or share interesting little nuggets of information. And I personally don't really know how I would do this job without that kind of online community. And I dip in and out of it for sure. Sometimes I go, well, this is a bit too much for me now. I need to just take a step back. But do you feel the same way? Do you feel like that's an important part of your Forest School life?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I've worked on my own for the last 10 years. I mean, I work with other people. I have projects with other people. I have bits of my work life that are with other people. But really, I work by myself a lot of the time. And I see social media as being a bit like a kettle. You know, when you sort of stand next to people and go, "Oh, have you seen the thing?" Or like, "Oh, look at this," or "I'm just a bit overwhelmed by this stuff. Have a little look at it and see what you think." And those little moments of connection.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think they help to sort of, you don't want to say like homogenize practice, but they kind of facilitate a bit of debate, and quite often you can see something bubbles to the surface, and it's like a bit of a hive mind of like, and it's just finding that balance, isn't it, between absolutely slating anyone who comes in with a different idea and not just rolling over and going, "Oh, whatever you want to do, that's fine. You've linked it to the curriculum and you do it inside a classroom, do you? Cool, that's fine with me."
Yeah, that's for
you can't do thumbs up, Lily. It doesn't work.
It's really tricky, isn't it? Because you're right. Some people feel that criticism more deeply, and because of the nature of social media as well, it's really hard to kind of get the feedback and the body language. I mean, like right now, I'm conscious of the fact that we're on Skype and I'm not seeing your body language. I would love to be sitting around a fire, because that has a different sort of connection. And as humans, that's what we're seeking a lot of the time, isn't it? Connection. And so then when somebody comes in with something, but there's been a long conversation about that previously, they don't get all of that history, it can be quite tricky for folk to navigate that. But at the same time, I've found that really valuable. And I guess my own practice, I'm always thinking about how we avoid being really judgmental and kind of look at the needs behind stuff. So sometimes I just kind of, I can't deal with the pylons. I have to think about, I have to look after my own well-being as well. So like you said, Emma, like sometimes you just have to duck out and kind of go, right, okay, I might just find another way of connecting with that idea or that person or that process or whatever it is that's being discussed, because that isn't always healthy, because other people have things that they're trying to work out, and we miss a lot of that stuff, don't we?
Definitely. You talked about working by yourself most of the time. When we've had other people on the show, which sounds weird to say, on the podcast, we kind of invite you to share a bit of your journey in the outdoors. Like, how did you start in your career, and what other stuff have you done?
How did I start this career? I think I started this career as a sort of fairly feral child who didn't quite get their act together, and it just happened to have all caught up with me as a profession now. I don't know if that's sort of a route into this, but it's a lot of the stuff that I did as a child and then as a teenager laid down a lot of the threads of work that I'm doing now. You know, I was my street champion tree climber and stuff like that. So it kind of comes easy, I guess, in this work, and living close to nature for a lot of my teenage and early 20s, for example. But then I started working as a play worker in the 90s, and so that's been my route into forest school, from play work rather than teaching, which is it's different to a lot of folk who find themselves in forest school now are from a teaching background. But for me, coming through play work, and then I worked for one of the wildlife trusts running a project about play in nature. And then I found forest school after that. so it's quite interesting to sort of see the stuff that I've been really trying to work on by myself as a play worker, and all the sort of thought processes I've been having, and then coming to not massively established, but more established pedagogy later in forest school, and kind of looking at what I'd already tried to work out and what forest school had already tried to work out, and squaring those two things together was quite interesting, really.
Yeah, I bet. And was there? Did you? Well, you must have found there was a lot of crossover. Otherwise, you would have maybe not gone down the forest school route at all and gone, "Oh no, I've worked this out. This is not going to work."
No, and I think that's the interesting thing, isn't it? That everybody brings, we all have those threads that we lay down through the different experiences that we have, and then we all bring that together. And I guess because forest school is larger than the sort of play work and play work in nature movement, that there's been more of that thinking, and I really get a lot from other people's thinking and learning and discussion. But one of the things that really struck me as one of the main differences was the role of reflection in forest school, and sort of consciously looking at the outcomes rather than just going, "Oh, have we had a lovely time in the woods? Great, hurrah! Like, let's do that again next week." Like really being a bit more intentional about what it is you're trying to create, and I think that's quite interesting.
Do you think that is what's made? I don't think it's a surprise to say forest school is like the buzzword at the moment, and has been for a couple of years. Do you think that's what has separated it from playworking being the buzzword, or do you think it's something else?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing and ask why you think that playwork is floundering, because it definitely is, whereas forest school is flourishing. If not, well, we could talk about what true forest school is and forest school that's being true to the principles of it, but kind of putting that aside for a moment, many more people are hearing about forest school, many more schools are on board with it. Your average parent that you talk to in the street will probably know what forest school is now compared to a few years ago, whereas play work has just all but disappeared, at least where we are now, and I wonder why that is.
Well, I think it's to do with because now social media is like a large part of like any movement really, and forest school is easier to photograph than play working, because if you try and photograph and share play working, it's quite difficult to show what you've put in place. But a photo of muddy children running in trees, like maybe innately touches some, I don't know, some pulls on some heartstrings maybe.
I don't know. I'm not sure about the kind of the Pinterestification of it. It's definitely going to be an aspect, right? Like, but play working can look really beautiful. But I think there's something other than that. I think there's something around the sort of social constructs that they tap into, and play work, I guess, is very overt about the sort of primacy of the play process and defending that against adult agendas. And maybe as society and culture has changed, and so I was doing play work stuff and forest school stuff back in what would be 2006. There was a big review, the Dobson Review, that came out, and loads of money was going into play work, and there was loads of money for play areas, and every local authority had to have a play policy in place. It was a government agenda, right? And then a few years later, things change and play work all but disappears. And so I think there's something about how palatable different approaches are to the bigger societal constructs. And playwork's pretty radical stuff.
It's very challenging, isn't it?
Right. Even for play workers, So, so I don't think it's just about the aesthetics. I think there's something much more fundamental about the sort of politics of pedagogy that's in there as well.
Yeah, play work could be seen as being more dangerous in that way of challenging kind of social norms, I guess. Whereas it's easier to digest the idea of a kid wielding an axe than it is to deal with the idea of actually, if they want to run around screaming, you let them do that and you don't tell them to sit down and be quiet, and those kind of other kind of principles of play work that more other adults might find more difficult to digest, I guess.
So is a child with an axe more dangerous than a child with their own thoughts? And I think that's maybe where the pedagogy of forest school isn't as well understood as the practical skills of forest school. People see but it's nice, it's the things that we got to do as children, and children are allowed to cook on fires and all these lovely wholesome things, and they maybe don't really fully appreciate the intention around child-led and child-directed learning, and kind of how empowering that can be, and what that does. The sort of politics of pedagogy are in there as well. Small p politics. Let's not go for big P politics, eh?
Yeah.
That's something that because one of the things we said we wanted to talk about was the kind of balance. You train forest school leaders and teachers and lots of different people, and I think from my own sort of research and looking at different leader qualifications, it seems to be a sort of a sliding spectrum between people advertising all just the practical skills, and it's almost not frowned upon, but you need maybe a bit more confidence to robustly advertise and say my course is good because of the ethos that you learn. And do you think that's something that's changed or is changing, or something that needs addressing?
That's a good question. I guess, I've been delivering training for nearly 10 years now, so maybe I'm a bit more, I was going to say secure in what it is I'm offering. Like, I'm not as kind of drawn by market forces as maybe I was when I was trying to fill courses, and people would see me and identify things, so I'm a little bit further into that journey, and you can be a bit more secure. So I don't know if I've intentionally gone, I'm going to advertise the ethos rather than the the what you get to do. You know, it's yeah, it is. But at the same time, I really feel like the process that people go through when they come on a training course is about creating their own relationship with nature and all the practical stuff and all the, you know, everything, so that when they're with children, they feel calm and they feel like they're connected. Because if they're not, then it's just going to be, you know, two whirlwind meeting and crashing.
That's a really nice way of putting it. I love that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, a lot of the stuff. So I recently wrote a bit on risk and was asked to think about risk and the role of risk in forest school. And again, I think that's one of the roles of training is to really process that information when your brain is calm, so that when something does happen, you can react in a way that's not just reactive, but you kind of plan that reaction, and you've been supported to plan that reaction as well.
Yeah.
I guess it's one of those. It's maybe something that is changing in terms of maybe 10 years ago, that the valuable thing about going on training was someone who's very experienced is going to teach you, for example, how to use a bow saw. But now you can look that up and you'll get 80,000 videos on how to use a bow saw, and you can almost self-teach that bit, but what you can't self-teach is ethos. And so possibly, you know, the value, like I'm saying, it's possibly more difficult to communicate, but actually the value of trainers is in, like you say, that nature connection and biophilia and stuff that's just, I think that's part of it, is that the practical skills are quite manageable in terms of how you think of them. You know, you could list off, I will learn 5 knife skills, I will learn this, but you go, well, are you going to learn all of the organisms that live in the woodland? Absolutely not. You know, it's too massive as a task.
Yeah.
I think also in a similar way to you describing kind of preparing somebody for dealing with difficult, risky situations, I kind of like the idea of equipping people to be able to deal with the difficult situations that they will face against either parents, schools, other adults who don't quite understand what forest school is, or who want to adulterate it. And if you have had a good foundation of, no, actually, this is pure forest school. Like this is what you're kind of aiming for in terms of the principles, the ethos, the child-led nature of it, and then we all accept what we end up doing may be different to that. It may be watered down through, necessity.
But it's understanding why, right?
But it's understanding the point and really believing in it, exactly. And kind of rather than, just go off and read about that for yourself and find out. Then you've got this week of like, I do believe in this, and I've spent a long time discussing it and the value of it, and so I'm ready and I'm confident that when someone questions me and asks me to do something that isn't part of that, I'm ready to stand my ground and go, I'm confident that this is the right thing to do. Yeah,
and I think being provoked and challenged as well is really valuable. I was just thinking what you were saying then about you can watch 20 videos on a knife skill, but if somebody goes, but if you don't like one of those videos, you just go skip, next thing, skip.
Yeah.
You can skip your way out of a tricky situation. But actually, one of the things that I find on training courses for myself and for others is that we kind of like find ourselves in these knotty problems and have to work them out, have to look at the bigger picture, have to think, well, what am I trying to achieve here? What's the outcome I'm aiming for? Right, let's work this backwards a little way rather than just going skip. Oh, I'm out of that knotty problem, or to something that I can deal with.
Yeah, because with a bunch of humans all together in a space together, you're going to inevitably get somebody who goes, well, that's not going to work for me, or I've got a child in mind who isn't going to be able to do that, or how about this? What about this situation? And that, as you say, challenges you as as a practitioner and somebody who is kind of facilitating training to go, oh, actually, do you know, I've never thought of that.
I mean, I go into every single course going, I wonder what I'm going to learn this week. And this courses that I'm teaching, that I'm fully excited for that, because it's the nature of the work, isn't it? If you're, like you were saying, you can't learn everything that's in nature. You can't learn everything about human beings, but you can have a damn good try, and that's the fun part. is there's always something new to discover. There's always something like, I have never thought about that aspect of human behaviour. Or slime mould. Oh my goodness.
Slime mould?
Slime mould today!
Slime mould today.
Oh,
I was convinced that Gemma was mental.
Yeah, Lewis was like, look at this jelly mushroom we found, Gemma. What is it? And I was like, oh, that's slime mould. It's intelligent. It can find its way back, la la la. And then Lewis was taking the mickey out of me and going, oh, and all the parents were laughing, going, what have you been smoking around the fire, Gemma? What have you been eating? And then Lewis Googled it.
It's because your immediate reaction was, I went, look at this mushroom, and you went, that thing's really clever.
I was, yes, Project Lifeform.
Yeah, slime moulds, they've got more processing power than NASA. No, that's not right. But you know, it's amazing stuff. It has a thinking process, but no basal ganglia.
I know.
Ridiculous.
How?
Yeah. So the fact
this conversation got really nerdy really quickly.
Slime molds.
Yeah,
that's slime molds. Start reading.
Can I just say that was always going to happen?
Yeah.
That's why I turned up, because I was fully expecting this to get really nerdy. But I like that it went on to slime molds. That's nice.
Yes.
But that's the thing, isn't it? There's always these things that are not just like little discoveries. Oh, there's a bird I've not seen before. It's like there's a whole subsection of something that functions in a way that I don't even understand. And we've always got those discoveries. Like, how can we ever possibly assume we're going to know all of this stuff?
I think that's one of the things, isn't it, that kind of it must have an impact on keeping people in forest school, which is not the most highly paid and not the most highly respected job, but the fact that we do every day.
It's learning.
We are in that moment of wonder, and then to be able to, I think partly you're trying to facilitate that because you know how amazing it is to be like, holy shit, slime mold exists, but also you're modeling it. And you're not pretending. You know, I did a lot of things when I was teaching where I was like, oh, I've got to pretend now that I'm really upset because they haven't written the date, right? And you've got to like play a character, but you like genuinely going like, holy fuck, this is, you know.
Yeah, you're experiencing the same emotions that the kids do alongside them, and I think I think you've hit the nail on the head about what keeps some people in it. It definitely keeps me in it in terms of just like I love. It sounds really nerdy. It sounds like I'm being really immodest. I'm not, but I love learning. Like I just would go on courses about anything all the time. Like that's how I stay sane. If I don't feel like, oh, I'm learning this new thing, and with this job, you are all the time. Especially, I think if you're working in the same place a lot, because you notice more. Because you know, the longer I work in our woods, the more I learn because I'm noticing stuff because it's changing. Whereas if I was in a different woods a lot of the time, I don't think I'd.
And that ties in as well, doesn't it? To like the long, you know, why is forest school long term? It's because I feel like I have similar reactions when it might not be slime mold, but it's like I know why he got upset. I've nailed it. And you're having like a relationship thing where you're also constantly learning about another, not just group of human beings, but like one individual and going. You are a journey for me. You learning about you and learning, you know.
Yeah. So it's funny. There's a story that I tell about a child that I worked with, and this child I worked with nearly 10 years ago, and it's when we're talking about reflecting with children, especially young children, and how that sometimes can be quite tangential. And you start off going, "Oh, great, we're going to have a lovely reflection about forest school," and then it just goes off on a chat about kittens or something like that. And this one
is it when two of them start talking about slime mold and you're trying to have a normal conversation?
this one particular boy, I said, so what have we been doing today at forest school? And he said, my granddad's got a ladder. Okay, all right, great. And then somebody else goes, oh, my granddad's got a ladder as well. Oh, I don't have a granddad. I've got a granddad, but he doesn't have a ladder. You know, you kind of hear every single person's expression about granddads and ladders, and then the lovely reflection you planned is all gone somewhere else, and off it goes. And I've been using this as an example of talking about how reflection can be tricky and other strategies for when you're working with especially younger children, how you do that. And then somebody asked me a few years ago, like, what had that child been doing that day? When they asked you that question, and I was like, this is like going back a few years. I wonder what they were doing that day. And then I connected it all together. He'd been climbing this one tree, but had tried to climb a different tree that he didn't normally climb. Wasn't one we normally tried to climb either, and he hadn't been able to do it. But his granddad's got a ladder, And it's like, oh, that's like 8 years later, finally understanding the kind of intention behind this reflection. This child's probably a teenager now, and it's going to be completely useless, this information. But it's interesting, isn't it, how that reminds us that those things that feel like a tangent at the time are actually probably really important. And it is about going on those journeys with people and trying to really get what's going on, rather than just assuming that people are being silly or daft or trying to sort of take it away from what you're trying to do. It's not about you. Like, you need to get over that.
Yeah. You're just the facilitator. You can't play kind of guess what's in my head with a group, or guess what I want you to do or to say, which is so similar with so many things in terms of like in similar way, like offering an activity or like approaching a person with a certain kind of expression or behavior, and kind of hoping that they'll accept it, or wondering if they're going to go with it, and then them just going no. You're like, okay. That's what I also love about working with kids. You're like, I was thinking we could do this or whatever. Oh, that reminds me. What you've just said reminds me. We could do this. And they go, no, I actually want to go collect rocks and smash them now. Or like we're trying to come up with a word for the expression that a young child gives you when you either react to something that they do or say, or approach them in a very playful, silly way. Do you know what I mean? Like, you might put something daft on your head and be like, ha ha ha, or how about this, or play this game, and they just don't even react. Just a complete and utter stony blank face.
You know what the word is for that expression? It's disdain. It's
disdain,
like, what do you think you are doing?
I know.
don't come at me. And I think a lot of that is because children are a lot more shrewd than we give them credit for, right? They don't get
a high bullshit meter.
Yeah, they really have. Yeah, absolutely. And they're not fools. Like, if you go, oh, I'm feeling really playful and silly, and you're actually not. You're faking it because you want them to feel more playful and silly, or you're trying to change the energy when actually, everybody does need to just be a bit quiet or a bit serious or a bit brave. Or
they don't like it when you say, I'm in a bad mood, fuck off, though.
I don't know, it depends how long you've been with a group. I think we were talking yesterday, it was very, very rainy, we had home ed all day, and we weren't in a bad mood, but there were certain things that we needed to get done.
We lost it yesterday.
Oh, we did lose it.
Absolutely lost it.
In a good way, though.
Yeah.
I was saying
not in
Christmas
an
Day
angry
is going to feel very lame after yesterday.
So we played, do you play the game Grumpy Badger?
I do not.
Okay, the Grumpy Badger is, you're only allowed to answer Grumpy Badger, and you're not allowed to smile. So you have to ask the person questions like, what's your name? What do you sleep with at night? What does your granny call you? And they're only allowed to say Grumpy Badger. Yeah, and we took it a step further, and we, one by one, filled our mouths with squirty cream, and then we're only allowed to say Grumpy Badger. And then the sugar hit all of us, including me and Gemma, at the same time. And we just lost it for about half an hour. We were playing Jenga and taking a brick out and going like, ah, like screaming.
It was reminiscent of some experiences I've had in nightclubs in my early 20s. Let's put it that way.
Squirty
it felt
cream in
really
your 30s
weird.
It's a cheap high.
It was extreme highs. Yeah, so it wasn't just like, oh, a block fell out. It was like, whoa! Oh, a block fell out!
Oh, did you all crash afterwards, though?
Do you know what? I don't think we did.
I think we did pretty well. It was just what we needed to get through the rain. We were meeting ourselves where we were.
It was fine.
We were. Yeah.
But
that wasn't what you were going to say.
In the morning, there were some kids going, oh, can we do this? And actually, we were like, no.
Because we knew it was going to rain. It was absolute we had a dry morning, and it was going to shed it down at 11 o'clock, and the kids arrive at 9:30. We wanted to cook pizzas, so we're like, we have to cut wood, we have to light the fire, and we have to get this dough done with warm water. That has to be our focus right now in the afternoon. And they were like, in the afternoon, you can smash flint with goggles on to your heart's content, but right now, we just need to stick with this for a second.
But the outcome was also really good, we realised, because we seldom do say no to children. Unless there's a very, very good reason. Like a kid comes and says, I want to do this. We're like, cool, let's do it. But for once, we were like, not right now, because we have to chop the wood. We just have to. And that actually had quite an interesting outcome, with a lot of children getting involved in stuff that they wouldn't normally get involved with. And we've got, a couple of characters who maybe go, I see what you're offering there, and I see that everyone's doing that. I am not going to participate, and I'm going to go off my own, which is fine. If they want to do that, they need to do that. That's fine. But there were some different behaviours around the fact that we were like, as right now, this is the focus, and it was quite a positive outcome.
It was.
Anyway,
so it's interesting that you're saying that, because I guess it kind of taps into what we were saying a bit earlier about that sort of, when you're trying to fake it, and actually that moment of pure congruence of like, if we're going to eat, and we need to eat because it's a basic fundamental need, and we need to sort out the tops and all those things, people, children, adults, they react to that, don't they? Like, oh, right, you're serious now. This is not just like, we'll have to chop wood because I say so for no discernible reason, because I'm the adult. That's the reason why we do things.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of children have experience of adults who tell them to do things, and there's no discernible, perceivable reason for that. Yeah. Actually, when some adults go, no, we need to chop wood because the rains are coming more. We need to batten down the hatches. Then of course it will change the behaviour, because it's real. It's proper stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's those children, a lot of them have been coming for quite a long time, and so they understood that when we were like, it's going to shed it down, that we're not, I mean, we're namby-pambies in other ways, but we weren't going like, it's going to be a drizzle. Then they had experienced not having a fire on in the rain, or they've had times where they've tried to do fire lighting and we've gone, it might be a bit wet today, and they do get it. They've got some background to understand it. And I guess, that kind of ties in. So I wanted to ask you about, so it was very windy yesterday. It was up to 36. I think by the end it was like 38 from the south, and there's no canopy because, it's just horrendous. And whenever people talk about wind speed anywhere, obviously your drawing is not far away. I feel like it's one of those, like on the internet, and they say it's only a matter of time before someone gets an argument gets reduced down to Hitler.
Right. And how, the same. Have I become Hitler?
You could have used a nicer thing like a cat.
No, but that's not. It's like an inevitability. If you see the words wind and outdoor learning, it's like a ticking time of like, oh no, 2 comments have gone, 3. There's Lily's pitch.
Yeah,
I kind of wonder about,
wind speed. That's brilliant. I love it.
I was kind of wondering about, what do you think? Well, one about your, what do you refer to them as? Drawings, doodles, paintings, masterpieces?
I know. I call them doodles because I have my own issues around. What's the word when you kind of go, oh, I can't be an artist, not me, that
imposter syndrome.
Yeah, that's the pigeon. Yeah. So I call them doodles, I think partly to diminish the fact I'm an art school dropout, therefore I've got a little bit of baggage there. That's all right, that's fine. So yeah, but it's interesting because that one, the wind speed one you're talking about, there's probably about 8 versions of that kicking around somewhere, because that one was a conscious thing that I was producing, because I kept seeing the same question and thinking, actually, there's not good. Not there's not good information out there, but there's not handy information out there that people are able to pick up easily. So if it's not out there, then let's just get it out there somewhere. But interestingly, because I was producing it for an audience, I readed it 7 or 8 times, whereas other things that aren't intended for an audience, I can just crack through a notebook in a day, really easily, just like drawing after drawing, and so that's quite interesting, isn't it? How the difference, I guess, it's because it's got an intention behind it. It's not as relaxed in some ways.
Well, I wondered. So one of the other one that sticks in my head is seeing your. So neither of us got to go to the Under One Tree conference this year.
Yeah.
But following you on Instagram, I saw your notes, doodles from the talks, and kind of, it was an interesting way to see the talks boiled down, because it wasn't just a kind of, here are the 5 bullet points. There's almost like subtext going on because it's a picture. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and those notes were ones I just produced for myself. But one of the things that happens is if you're sitting drawing in a public place, people like come and go, "Oh, what were you drawing?" And you go, "Oh, I'm just drawing the notes of the thing." And then a number of people asked me over that weekend, and I thought, actually, yeah, they're a really nice thing to share because they, like you say, they're a different way of perceiving the same information. So even somebody else who's in the same room wouldn't maybe have perceived that information in the same way. So I thought, I don't know, that's actually quite a nice way to share a flavour of things and what I've got from something as well, because it's only ever going to be my interpretation of somebody else's words. It's interesting. I've got, you can probably see behind me actually. Can you see all the notebooks on the?
Yeah, we can see lots of books behind you.
So shuffled Skype round, so you can kind of see. But there's racks and racks of notebooks there going back over the last sort of 15 years or so of sort of my learning journey, and I've definitely got better at distilling ideas down into a single image and then moving on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there's loads and loads of written words and one or two drawings to illustrate it, and now it's the few drawings with one or two words next to it, and then I move on to the next page, and kind of like I'm not trying to fill the page anymore. I'm just trying to capture and move on, which is good, I think. And then I've got something I can go back to, because that's what I realised was then when I looked through my notebooks, I was only looking at the pictures because I really like comic books and I like cartoons and I like that stuff. So
yeah.
So and actually a lot of my training materials are on big rolls of wallpaper with drawings and doodles and stuff like that, rather than PowerPoint presentations. And that's been a really interesting transition, moving away from the PowerPoint and seeing how people respond to that as well.
Oh, I can imagine the moment of unfurling gives you magical air when you've already, gone into the woods with this lady, and then she unfurls, says, "Don't worry," and brings out a massive roll of wallpaper. What is this? And she's going, "Slime mold is great," and you go, "God." Is that day one? You've got to settle people in day one with full weird, just so that the rest of the course is okay.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, what do you mean full weird?
You've listened to this, right? This is pot calling the kettle.
Can I just say that's not weird? That's completely normal in my experience.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, isn't it? Although going back to what we were talking about, congruence, you're right, it is a bit full weird, isn't it? Having rolls of wallpaper and an obsession with slime mold, but it's not. It's the stuff that I do get genuinely excited about, and people respond to that rather than what it is in some ways. That kind of really, people pick up on your enthusiasm for things and your excitement for things, and if you're not an enthusiast, then I don't know.
Think that comes. I mean, we were talking before about being, authentic reactions and being authentically interested, and actually, I think that's one of the things that is underrepresented in kind of people's not training, but it almost could be another principle of number 7 could be you should be authentic in your needs and interests and other things, because actually, if I think about it, a lot of what in my head, if people go, "Oh, I do this is my practice and I do this and whatever," it's not necessarily that I disagree that children should have those experiences. It's that they're playing a role, or that they're being, like a teacher, they're going, "Well, my class are going to go outside and we're all going to make leaves, and I've seen this pink thing on Pinterest where we draw faces on the leaves." And I don't get the vibe of I'm genuinely excited about drawing faces on leaves today. Yeah. This is going to be the best thing ever. Whereas the stuff that we do, and I feel I see it come across from your social media stuff, Lily, and your pictures, is that we are genuinely excited about what we're doing, and genuinely excited, even if we're not genuinely excited in the activity. It's I'm excited for the experience that the children are about to have. I know how well this is. I think I know how well this is going to. And then the kids go, "Nah." But but then they find something else, and you're like, "Whoa!
did not expect that to be the thing that was going to be amazing today. So there's the thing we did this summer where I can't remember what we had planned, but we were really excited for how amazing it was going to be. And then there was a little bit of faffing around because we were going to try and get off site and go to a different area. And there was this little bit of kind of hanging around and faffing about. And the thing that we planned involved a big pointed stick. And then one of the kids just happened to like smack it on the top with a mallet, this big pointed stick, but in such a way that it was buried, and a long stick. So this is like maybe a I don't know, 5 foot stake, and they managed to bury it all the way into the ground. And we never got off site because for the next 3 hours we were just trying to work out ways to get this pointed stick out of the ground.
Amazing.
Buried 5 feet in, and we had a pulley that was over a tree, and we had some sort of winch system, and it just became more and more complicated. And it was genuinely my favourite thing of the day was this pointed stick that got stuck in the ground. Amazing. Because like nobody would plan that. Nobody would plan. Let's get fully immersed, like 9 people fully immersed in just trying to get a stick out of the ground. You wouldn't ever write that in a plan. No, nobody would walk in there with that intention. But in the moment, it was exactly what we all needed and engaged. In fact, for about 3 days, because we kept going back to it until somebody just got a space.
3 days?
Yeah. Well, low level on day 2 and 3, but not as intense as day 1. But it took a while, to get the stick out. It was a long stick, and it was a long way in the ground. And also, we couldn't dig the whole ground up because it was at the edge of a farmer's field, on the edge of the woods that it got buried in. Anyway, for whatever reason, we couldn't just dig a big pit. So it needed a lot of human ingenuity, and that was quite. It's always satisfying, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
It kind of leads on to. I mean, we were talking before we did the podcast about people feeling like they need to have like the perfect site or the perfect, or I can't do anything on my site because we've just got this scrappy bit of, there's only a few trees on the edge of the school field, or we're doing whatever. And you were saying about that you're doing some training in a very small bit of woodland.
Mm. Yeah, and it's interesting. So the site that I've been delivering training on is an urban site. It's got a bus stop right next to it. It's amazing. And I've been there for about 3-4 times. And then this time when I went back was the first time I've been there in proper winter. I've been there in autumn. And because all the leaves had gone, suddenly this site went from being a site where you could hide and a site where you could explore. It just felt like there was nothing. I walked in on the Monday morning and was like, oh crap, somebody's nicked the woodland. Like, what's gone on? I was looking around, I was like, where is everything? There's nothing here. Like, have they chopped things down? I was really, this might sound a bit daft, but I was baffled by the fact that it was winter. Yeah. That's what.
Yeah.
That's the quote. Chair of the FSA baffled by winter.
I had the same thing this week with the wind, though, right? I kept saying to you all day the other day, exactly the same as you, kind of going, but the wind is from the south, and I can feel it. Like what? But there's wind from the direction, but the leaves aren't there, so I can feel that thing is moving in the wind. And it's like, there are no leaves on the tree, idiot. Like what would you expect? It does feel very, very different.
Yeah.
So you had to learn about winter. Go on.
So having never seen this particular site in winter, it kind of threw me. Walking in there and going, oh, and actually you couldn't really hide on this site anymore. You could in the summertime. It was great, but it made me have to really think about my reactions. And I talked to the group about it. I said, this is the reaction I got from this. But then, interestingly, over the process of that week of training, by the end, there was a bit on, it's been maybe the end of day 4, and we were sitting there around the fire in the dark because it's winter and the course didn't finish till 5, sitting there with the big full moon, with a fire in the dark, and it just felt so primal and so wild. And then I kind of looked up and went, oh yeah, there's a car park 10 feet away and the road 10 feet that way and nothing between us. But the fact that this little tiny scrap of woodland had managed to hold this really huge wild feeling for a whole group of people, not just me, I wasn't on my own in that necessarily. I find that really fascinating, and that's because we've been really connecting with that space and exploring that space and looking at the affordance of that space for a good few days. And actually, after 4 days of that, it had all of those things in there for us. It wasn't lacking the loose parts. It wasn't lacking in, there was a jay that would come through quite regularly and squirrels running around. So although it's very small, sparse woodland, it still had the richness that maybe a big ancient semi-natural woodland might have, but kind of condensed somehow and lost. So it's really interesting, isn't it? It's like how it's not about how many trees make a forest school site, but it's about, does it have that feeling of other? Can you create that feeling of other?
I think as you were talking, that's what I thought. It's about how you approach it, I think, isn't it? Because if you are doing forest school well, as a group, if you're allowing yourself the time and the space to play in that place, then it's about allowing yourself to see it and feel it, isn't it? As opposed to what's actually there. If you were, right, we are on a mission today to complete X, Y, and Z in this place, then you wouldn't feel that nature connection, and therefore you probably would get that sense of the road and the car park and feeling a little bit, I don't know, hemmed in by a tiny space. But because you've approached it in that way, maybe that's actually the important thing. It's about the way that you facilitate the nature connection through your relationship with the group and the space rather than the space itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I was thinking about, I often think about a site which I did pop-up forest school on, and it was a school field with trees around the edge, and it wasn't amazing, but I often was very interested in the way that the kids would then approach their school field after having done several weeks of forest school there. Do you know what I mean? Like, has that changed the space for them because they've been accessing it in a different way, and especially because they were in the summer playing on that school field at playtime, and then they go in and then they change their clothes and then they come out and do forest school in exactly the same place but wearing different clothes, and they're kind of allowed to do different things in the same space because it's forest school as opposed to lunchtime, and how that might change somebody's relationship with the space because they've been doing forest school in inverted commas there. It's kind of weird.
But there's a lot in there about permission as well, isn't there, and intention. So you're kind of saying by putting on these clothes and kind of coming out with this intention, you now have permission to what it is that they then go on to do. And I think children are quite sensitive to that. They different rules can apply in different places, and they, in the same way you use different language in Granny's house that you might use at home. Children have that ability to move between social spaces and physical spaces where different rules apply.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, isn't it? I was thinking about a friend of mine who's a teacher, was a teacher and forest school practitioner, retired now. And she said, because she was using a similar space, and she said that as they left the school, they would ritually dust themselves off of the rules and kind of their practice of school, and prepare themselves to kind of be in the woodland or in the forest school area. And that, I think, there's something really key about that. It's about, okay, now we're doing this. There's a transition here. This is what we're moving into next. I find quite interesting how those rules can apply.
I think that's one of the other things as well is when you think about practice that is heavily linked to a school curriculum, whether that be what the children have got to learn at this age, or even just stuff like, oh, we're doing Egyptians this half term. It's another rope sort of keeping them tied to that school environment, and so it's even harder to, as you say, dusting off that kind of school environment if you get out. And yes, all the permissions are different, but you've still got this, school anchor weighing you back to, no, if it's not the Egyptians, you're not to be interested in it. And that's something that's kind of, I don't know, quite tricky to
explain.
Yeah.
Until you've done it. Yeah. Done it for quite a long time.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about a teacher that I was talking to who had been doing some forest school stuff with his class, and they'd been reading. Was that right? I'm sure he said Beowulf, but now I'm doubting it because
they do read Beowulf.
in primary school, oof, that's quite hefty, isn't it? But anyway, so they'd come out and started playing at Grendel and Grendel's mother and all of this sort of thing.
Jesus.
So, can you imagine? So when children are allowed to carry those things but carry them lightly, he didn't introduce the idea of let's play Grendel and Grendel's mother, but something had really provoked them, and then the same feeling that they'd felt maybe when they were reading that they got from being in the woodlands, and it comes out, and that's good. Where education, because I'm sure I've read that education, educare, the word means to draw out rather than to put in, and I love that idea that that's what we're trying to draw things out rather than cram or force or shoehorn things in.
Yeah, similarly, I've had a session at the same place where I think the whole school had been doing Vikings or something, and so it was Viking dress up day, and so I had year 6 doing forest school on their school field when it was Viking dress up day.
Incredible.
So some of them, oh my goodness, they had outfits to die for. They had like fake fur boots that their mum had made. There's this brother and sister who just came just completely kitted out. I was like, this is incredible. And then of course, so then they wanted to play a certain way at forest school and do like lots of kind of archery type stuff and real kind of Viking activities in a similar way. It's like, oh my gosh, now we're allowed to do this in this space with this kind of freedom, and and I'm sure that will be this very memorable for them. When we did Vikings and then we did the outside time,
Do you find, Lily, when you're doing your training, I mean, obviously not to sort of, I don't want you to name any students, but do you ever have people that because it is very different, like the practice of being a forest school leader is kind of going out and going, children, what do you want? What's your interest? But the process of training other forest school leaders, you've got a thing to kind of go, well, this is the ethos, this is the pedagogy that you're kind of conveying. Have you ever had anybody I know you're saying you're always learning, have you ever had anybody that you've kind of thought, it just doesn't get it or won't get it? And if
doesn't need it, actually. There are people where, and that's been part of the sort of conversation at the end of the course, is maybe you could just take all of this stuff that I've been talking about and do some really good quality outdoor learning with the skills that you've developed, and I think that'd be brilliant. I think that's a really good outcome for you. But this particular approach or pedagogy maybe isn't for you. And I've had that conversation, not often, but sometimes it is about recognizing where, like this is something you say a lot, right? Recognizing where people are now, and rather than saying no, you have to be over here. Like maybe in 10 years' time, that person might be an extraordinary forest school practitioner, but right now they really want and need to be doing good quality outdoor learning. And that's,
Or maybe not even that. There were people on my course when I was training, so many people just didn't finish. And I think it was that probably because they had this idea that they were going to like it, they were going to love it, and they needed to do it. And then they got there.
Or that,
and I think by day 3, they were kind of like, oh, I'm not really sure about this. I'll kind of go through the motions. And then when it comes to doing your coursework, like, why would you? Unless you're completely smitten with the idea, why would you devote that much time? And
that's kind of one of the drawbacks to it being like a buzzword and a trend at the moment is, I think there are probably an increasing amount of people who are being sent on forest school training by their head teacher or sent by the governors because they've got a grant for it, who haven't sort of researched it and gone, oh right, this is a whole different pedagogy. There might be people arriving who are going, yeah, I did talk for writing phonics learning in a 1-week course last week, and now I'm doing forest school this week, and not that talk for, I'm just saying that like talk for writing is a tool that goes in your teaching tool belt, but forest school is a completely different outfit, and that's a big thing that I think people need to get across, and that's that's I think sometimes where a lot of the jarring comes, is when people are trying to wear the teacher belt and the forest school coat at the same time, and not that we don't all wear layers and layers and layers and layers. But yeah, I mean, so if you've had people like that, do you have anything that you like we're saying, you personalise everything as much as you can, but do you have anything that you go, oh, I always do this with a group because this always makes cracking nature connection? This is a 5-minute thing that I always make sure my groups do, or Do you know what I mean? Stuff that's a real banker.
Oh, you want me to give away my secrets?
I know.
Well, no, I just...
I'm just trying to think. I mean, I guess for me, I weave little drops through everything. So, you know, I'm just thinking often on the second day of a course, we'll play hide and seek type games. You know, we'll look at how we set boundaries with a group, and then we'll play a sort of game where you hide and you have to move and all those sort of things. But then when people come back, that's a really good opportunity to talk about, you know, did you find yourself lying somewhere you wouldn't have normally laid down?
Mm-hmm.
Did you find yourself pressed up against something you wouldn't normally get that close to? Because playing those sorts of games, you do. And, you know, when people come back and go, oh, do you know, I was really close to a spider, but I didn't want to move because I didn't want to be seen. And that's like the start of weaving that nature connection in there is letting people recognise that they're slipping in, you know, they're slipping into the forest and naming some of those things as well. Because actually, fundamentally, and this is something I definitely do go on about on courses, the place when we are in the woods is where our bodies and brains have been sculpted to be. You know, that being inside in a room with electric light isn't the default setting for my species. You know, that's not, you know, it's only really been the last couple of 100 years that we've been doing that. So when we start to tune in, we're starting to allow all of those things that are naturally built for that system to come to the forefront, you know, and I think as people start to realise that they can be themselves in that environment because that's the place where their body and brain likes to be, it helps them relax into it as well. It's like, actually my eyesight is designed for this because I can do close up and I can do far away, and you know, and all those sorts of things, and looking at how that impacts physiologically as well. You know, sort of the things that does for our system, for our, you know, our nervous system.
It's interesting, isn't it? Seeing, I think there's I always think of it as like a bell curve in that people with very, very minimal nature knowledge just find being outside too scary, too overwhelming. For some people, it can be a real challenge. And then there's kind of this middle bell curve of getting some nature knowledge and, like you say, feeling calm and do all this thing about forest bathing and doing whatever else. And then I think there's some outliers at the other end of that spectrum who have such intense nature knowledge that they're like, I can't be outside because the birds will not shut up and they're telling me about that stupid thing over there and I already know about it. And the moss is just like, the moss is too loud. The moss is too loud for me right now. And it's interesting, isn't it? That curve of, like you say, we're all built to do it, but you can overdo. You can, maybe that's not overdoing it, but
I was going to say, can you overdo it? I think it's context, isn't it? I mean, I find myself sometimes when I'm with a group in the woods and then there's something going on over there and I'm like, oh, there's some really interesting chat going on over there, but I'm with the group, I'm present in this moment with these people, but let's just have a look at their, oh, yep, there we go, there's a sparrowhawk, you know. Yeah. But is that too loud? Because I think the distractions are part of the environment that you're in, you know, that you can't stay fully on task, because why would you? Because that racket over there might mean a sparrowhawk or a weasel or whatever, and why would you not want to tune in?
Or a tiger.
Be a tiger, right? Exactly. Our bodies and our brains are tuned into that stuff because it means something that could be important to us.
We were talking a talk by Tristan Gooley, the natural navigator, and he was saying, I think I'm right saying it was him, who was talking about when you're at a dinner party and you can be completely involved in your conversation, but you can hear your name muttered from across the room, and that your brain tunes into it. And what that means is your brain was always scanning for it. Your brain was always, there's a second track that you're not always aware of. And I think that's another thing that's being outside, is that is the nature connection, is that second that second system whirring in the background going, tiger, 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 tiger. No, it's just a bush, it's fine.
Where's the food? Where's the food? Where's the food? Could that be food?
It's slime mold.
Yeah, and I guess in some people that gets louder and louder. It's definitely got louder for me over the last 20 years, even though, like I say, I was quite a feral child and a very feral teenager, you know, lived outdoors for a lot of years. I guess as I've got more tools and skills for tuning into it, it's got louder. So it's not just about proximity. It's about the tools and skills for it. And I guess that's something else that I can't remember what you said earlier, but I was thinking, what's the role of training is actually, passing on some of those little tools or skills or insights that help people pick up on what's out there as well, because you could learn everything by just sitting still and watching, but it would take you a lot longer than somebody going, just have a watch what's going to happen here next, and this is why I'm looking here. It kind of shortcuts a little bit of that learning process.
Yeah. Have you got anything that you're, we're saying we're always learning stuff. Is there anything that's on your radar at the moment that's kind of come up maybe in the last week or something that you kind of go, I've actually delved into this rabbit hole recently, this,
I'm always vaguely off down some rabbit hole or other. It's I think it's the default setting for my brain. But maybe a bit like you, Jem. You're like, what will I be learning next? What am I? So I've started reading a book, but I only got about 3 pages in before I had to make something, and it was a book about depression actually. But it made me want to go off and make things out of matchboxes, and so this is part of the problem, is that I'll start off trying to do one thing, and I often have to have a tangible way of processing big ideas. So in this book about depression and nature, there's so much in there. I had to just, like, it starts to fizz, and I have to kind of I think that's why I draw, actually, because it's just like can get some of the fizz out my fingers.
I found that with it's a book that lots of people know of, but I don't think many people have pushed through, is The Coyote Guide.
Oh,
do you
yeah.
know this one? And it's such an incredible book, but like you say, 2 pages in, and I'm like, I've got to go and put this down and try it now. And then it takes me another week, and then I go, right, okay, another 2. It's so dense in terms of knowledge and inspiration that it only takes 2 pages. And I would love to, in my head, I'm like, just sit down and read it and finish the book, Lewis, because you're nearly there.
No, but some books don't read that way, do they?
No, and in fact, I think in the Coyote Guide it says, "Don't read this book. Burn the book. Like, don't get hung up on reading the book. Actually, take a little bit of it and then go and live it for a while, because you can't integrate information just with one processing strand. You can't just read a book and then know something. You've got to."
Hang on, that's what the educational system is built on. Just be careful with your... That's the whole state schooling, is we put the information in and now it's there.
So it must be true then, right?
Yeah, of course.
but that's, when you're saying about is there one thing you do for that nature connection? It can't be one thing. There might be one thing that really means a lot to one person, but actually if you just keep dripping it in all the time, like every, and naming it, then it'll come. And the same with the sort of the theories. You just need to keep dripping stuff in and then seeing it and seeing how it plays out. You can't. I think that's why I really like the immersive nature of training. But then I have to go away and also work with children, young people, and families in order to top it back up again, because otherwise it becomes again that authenticity thing. It becomes inauthentic, doesn't it? Because you're not actually having to tip it out. You just yes. It all works in theory.
And kind of like we were saying before about you're always learning new things, and actually part of what forces, I think, forest school leaders to keep the ones that are, let's say, more reflective practitioners, is that if you took your practice from 5 years ago and put it onto what's happening today, one, you're a different leader, but also you could have 2 groups of 11-year-olds, but 5 years apart, those 11-year-olds have got different experiences, they've got different technology, they've got different, you can't just go as you would in teaching. You might go, I've got week 3, day 2 literacy, I've got that plan, it will always be the same. But forest school is a constant, like, children are like this now, children are like this now, and that kind of pushes you on, doesn't it?
And the environment, and that's going to change so dramatically over the next few years as well. I mean, there was a discussion, there's lots of discussions at the moment on the group about rain, how much wetter. Those practitioners have been working for a longer time than we have, and reflecting on how the weather has changed and how that's affecting our practice, and that's only going to change more quickly and more dramatically as time goes on, which is a depressing thing to think about.
Well, is that something that you think needs to be, because when I did my training, I definitely felt that I was being given a kind of like a set handbook of like, this is how you do the thing, this is how it's quite prescriptive, and it wasn't necessarily saying this is what we do now, but maybe in a few years it'll be like this, or maybe in a different woodland you do like this. It was quite, do you feel like that's something that you have to constantly balance when you're doing training, is going, but this might all be rubbish in 2 years, or this might completely change, or,
It's interesting. I think when I first started training, I was much more like prescriptive in, this is the way to do this, because I wasn't as confident in going, do you know what, I don't actually know. This is the way I've been doing it. This is what works for me and why it works. But there might be another way that's going to be better. And it's interesting that I'm maybe more vague now that I've been doing it longer than I used to be, where you think I'd know more, so I should be clearer. And I don't think I am at all. And I think a lot of the people who have been on my courses, I was going to say would describe me as quite annoying, but I don't think that's right. But I'm loath to be pinned down. Say yes, I know the answer to this, and this is the answer.
Slippery.
Right, I can be a bit slippery to the point where people go, I'm not even going to ask you. I'm going to just like work this out myself, which is what I'm after, right? That's why I'm slippery, because otherwise, why?
That's a great way to make money.
That's around going, I have no idea. Work it out yourself, people.
What do you think?
But I think, it does depend, and I've noticed a lot how I've had to change my practice or adapt for different people and different contexts. So I'd rather have that people have a basic set of skills and then start to think about why they're doing that and what's the outcome they're working towards, and what might change that, and what factors might make them do something differently. And that's definitely becoming increasingly part of my practice as I train. That wasn't at the beginning. Although now I'm saying that, I'm just thinking about somebody who very early on in my training career said, all you'll ever say is it depends. So maybe I have always been doing that, but maybe it's become much more conscious these days. Because I trained for quite a long time in other sectors before I started doing forest school training. So I'd been a trainer for quite a long time before I did forest school stuff as well. So I don't know, maybe not. Maybe I've always been slippery. Who knows? I'll have to think about that one.
Cool. I'm just looking at the questions. I guess actually the last question I've written is one that I wanted to ask, which is I've written down, how does a lack of nature connection impact on play, which I feel ties together what we've been talking about, as play working, and is there a noticeable difference to play if there isn't a nature connection, and can you see play change as that connection strengthens?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that as a play worker and in the play work community I'd sometimes feel a bit uncomfortable about is, I had my own nature connection, and a lot of play workers would talk about, the value is in the play process. So that becomes the primary focus.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you take that to its logical extreme, what if somebody's then chopping up worms or hitting a living tree so the bark comes off? And some people would go, well, people have got to work through that, and that's part of their play process, and it's important to work through that. But there's that bit of me that I guess was a teenage eco warrior that can't quite be there when I can't witness that. So then how do I respect the play process, which is important, but also respect the worm, which that balance is quite an interesting one. And the conversations that come out of that when you're working with children are really interesting, and trying to do that without judgment. So not going in there going, stop doing that, you're hurting a thing, why are you doing that? Because that's the bit of us that if you're...
It's counterproductive, isn't it, most of the time?
Right. Well, you're just being told off. So what do? You sneak off and find somewhere where people can't see you, and you carry on because that was part of the process that you were interested in, and a judgment will just make you do it somewhere else. And but actually, sort of showing an interest in, oh, what are you doing? Oh, okay. Well, let's look at what it is that you're looking at. Just thinking about some lads that I was with a few years back, and they were hitching it. It was springtime, and they were hitching a tree, and the bark came off really easily because it's that time of year when bark delaminates really easily from a tree, and it was coming off in lumps, and I saw these lumps flying away, and I kind of went pelting over there. I was like, oh, what's happening here then? You know, what is it that's going on? They're like, oh, if you hit this tree, bits fly off. Like, that is amazing. Let's just feel the tree. What's happening? It feels wet, because of course it is, because the sap's running, you know. And we started to talk about what that wet be and what's going on with the bark. And then like, is that tree's blood? Like, yeah, it kind of is. You know, it's the same sort of thing. It's the water that's moving to their body. And they worked it out themselves that they were, you know, being quite brutal to this tree. And it's tricky in those moments because the everything about me was screaming, stop doing that, you know, like my internal voice. My internal voice in those moments, I had to kind of go, you know, get a grip of myself, because my internal voice is like, stop hurting trees. But okay, so what's happening? What's the process? What's going on here?
Yeah,
it's tricky, isn't it?
I guess that's. I mean, to a much lesser extent. No, maybe a greater extent. You might have children who have a need to like push through their play, like just push other children over, and in the same way as you could just run over and scream and go, we don't push, we never push, and then they will just push somewhere else. But equally, you can't just stand idly by and go, well, little Johnny needs to push, so I'm afraid so.
Yeah.
You know, you have to find that balance and go. So do you think that's what the biggest change is with nature connection comes more respectful play? Is that...
Yeah, so as you were describing that, I was thinking, because you want to be in community with the other people that you're with. So, that's why we maybe stop and kind of empathise with how they might be feeling when we push them, and all that stuff we might do there is about trying to build that community of learners. But if we then include the trees and the worms and the slime moulds in that community, that's nature connection, right? We're all part of this bigger community. It's not just the humans that are making this community up. It's a bigger thing than that.
But for some people, that connection takes a very long time. And as you're in the same way saying you can't get an outcome that is positive by just going, don't do that. You can't force nature connection on people of any age. You can't go, hey, listen, we're all a community now. Like, children will or will not feel that to different degrees after spending a long period of time in the same place with similar people, with that freedom, and with that freedom in that same place every week for a long time will naturally come that with a bit of facilitation, as like
also
you're describing.
It's for a lot of children, it's kind of building that that it's a responsibility, and like the cliche of when you are powerful you have to learn to be responsible. And so that idea of you do in that setting have the power to completely fuck up a tree in an afternoon. You can fuck up a 200-year-old tree by just taking the bark off it, but if you explain how, or you can squash that worm, or you can do whatever. And I think actually part of it is knowing that you are being so powerful to these other things in the community is sometimes what influences you to then go, and I will be benevolent with my power. And I don't know, that's such a weird explain.
And there's a difference between changing behaviour within a session and facilitating a longer term learning as well, isn't there? So the behaviour describing about bashing a tree or whatever, the kids might still do that next week, but in a few years' time, they might have a different feeling towards trees than they would have done if they hadn't have done that and had that experience. Mm-hmm. So there's arguments around that as well, isn't there? In terms of if the young adult had not smashed all the bark off a tree and felt the tree's blood, they may not care as much about trees as a young adult as they had because of the time they nearly killed that tree. So that's often...
But we talked about this on the should you pull the legs off a spider, where we say, is one spider's death worth them becoming a botanist and, saving millions and millions of spiders? And the same goes for trees or for woodland or for, it's a hard balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah, and I did bad stuff to woodlice as a child. I can say that to you.
Yeah.
But
that's evil to ants.
Oh, flying ants. I used to try and run them over with my bike.
I used to pour boiling water on their nests.
Did you?
Yeah. Boil a kettle, pour it on the anthill, see what happens. Yeah.
Okay, before we all get reported, what were you going to say, Lily?
Well, I was going to say they are fully my favourite animal now. And that's kind of... in the same way.
I'm scared of you, mate. They've all talked and they've had a chat and they've decided that they need to fear the enormous Lily that will torment their family.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, woodlice are all in my power now. No, but I think in the same way you wouldn't walk into a massive room full of people and go, oh, right, these are all my friends now. That's not how relationships work. And sometimes you do bad stuff to your friends as well. This is part of the things that the children were with not need to learn, but will learn, is that sometimes you do bad stuff to your friends, but then you repair those relationships and you move on together. And so, yeah, those children who were hitting the tree and taking its bark off, being able to repair those relationships, like, oh, let's feel the tree. Oh, we can kind of imagine how that might be if that was our blood coming out, and all those sort of things. It's about trying to reconnect those relationships so that, like you say, in the future there might be children who have a care for those things and want to look after them, become the future stewards, custodians, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah. Okay,
cool.
You need to shoot off.
I'm going to go now.
Gemma needs to go and get her tiny children. Tiny.
Last day of term. Woo!
Oh, hooray. Oh, do you know, it's solstice. I was going to say we should... We haven't got snacks or anything. We should have had mulled wine.
A Christmas party. I know. We had a very nice session with a parent-Todd group this morning where we made Yule bundles and of sticks and wrote worries and hopes on the paper and ceremonially burnt them. And it was very, very pleasing. And there were some people who've been for quite a long time who I think enjoyed it.
Well, we said it was the prime example of, like, you can't go full weird on day one.
Except that there was a dad there who'd never been before. His little girl had been lots of times, but this is like day one for him because Mummy normally comes. And then after we'd like ceremonially burnt the faggots, I was like, and now we're going to dance around the circle and chant, ha! And then he laughed, and I was like, you think we're joking? We're not joking. We have to do that now. Now is the time we sing the weird songs, and he just was like,
That's another word we need, is when you've got an established group and then there's like one person joining a new community and everyone else does the thing. Everyone else in our group stood up behind like the circle of benches and immediately started chanting an African song that makes that we don't really know what it means. We just sing it at drum. And just every time a new person joins and they see the rest of the group go, it must be like, holy there's weirdos in the woods. What are we doing?
Yeah, I think there's a word for that as well. I think it might be cult.
Weird cult on the hill.
Well, we've established that that's what people thought I was doing before you joined. Yeah, so maybe we're just living up to it. But thank you for your time, Lily.
Yeah, thank you.
It's such a pleasure. I hope we can catch up again because I like it. I like fully nerding out with people who like to fully nerd out is my pleasure. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay.
Happy Yule. This is it's a good Yule present. This podcast to the listeners. So, yeah.
Maybe we'll have to release it on Yule then.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, right. Okay.
Yule people and love stuff. Thanks, folks.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
You can visit Children of the Forest in person and get incredible face-to-face training on a range of different topics, whether you're a full-time forest school teacher, a classroom teacher, or senior management. Visit childrenoftheforest.com for details and to book on to all the upcoming training.